But the point is, maps are more than just how to get from point A to point B, and also they're more than just reference documents, like where is Yemen, where is Denver, where is Albania, etc. They're tools for analysis. And that's what I wanted you to get out of this, that, hey, wow, I didn't realize that maps were so relevant to modern decision making, and they really are. One more example before we move on, and that is another resource that my organization hosts, this mapping platform, and people use it, for example, to look at, and you probably have looked at this as well this summer, what are the current wildfire perimeters? Kind of a relevant situation here. You see this image behind me. This is my homeland, Grand Junction, Mesa County, Colorado. That ridge behind me is this ridge right here. So I'm standing on Mount Garfield, which is right where I've got the mouse right now, and you can see that this Pine Gulch incident burned for about a month from early August to about the 1st of September. Thankfully, it was finally put out. But the point is, that ridge behind me was the one that was aflame. And you wouldn't think there was enough vegetation. You look around here, there's some scrub, pinions and junipers and a couple of sagebrush plants. That's about it, but that burned for quite a while. And so wildfires being an extremely relevant issue of our time, and probably you have watched the progress, sadly, of the Grizzly Creek incident. The point is, we've got these real-time feeds coming in from a variety of sources, stream gauging stations, wildfire perimeters. How do you get that? Well, from crews reporting what the ground crews, but also from UAVs or drones flying over these perimeters, from other sources as well. But the point is, you've got a variety of source earthquake seismometers where you're getting these live feeds or near real time. Because why? Because people want to map things increasingly in real time or near real time. Now, nothing against a static map. I used to work at Usgs. As you know, I've got loads of static maps that are paper, that are wonderful. I've got a house full of maps. I don't have any wall space for maps. Probably, maybe since you're in this course, maybe you can relate. Who's got a whole pile of maps at home? All right, Brad, thanks for admitting that. So anyway, the point is, you've got this interactivity. So if you go, for example, to the ESRI wildfires page, you'll see this interactive map just like I have, and it's actually linked to the SWAY presentation that I put in the chat box earlier, so you can actually do this. Now, Cameron Peak, west of Fort Collins, and then we've got this newer one that started just last week up here on the Colorado-Wyoming border. So again, people want the information, not just for like armchair looking at maps, but to make decisions. Do I need to evacuate? Do I need more crew, fire crew up there? What's the direction of the wind so I can add information to this? What's the soil moisture in that area? What is the atmospheric pressure? What's the forecast in the next 48 hours? Where's the nearest access road? All of that. What's the population in that area, etc. That's the kind of thing that we can do with these modern maps. So before I go on, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you have a favorite map? And would you like to share that in the chat box or just in audio? Either way. Do you have a favorite map? All right, while you're thinking about that and possibly putting it in the chat box or speaking, I'm going to share with you a couple of my favorite maps. My favorite map is probably, although it's really hard to say, but this map from Gale, Thielen, and Pike back in 1992. This was pretty significant for its time because the idea behind this map is that this map is the first map that was made from a digital elevation model that was stitched together. So the old contour maps, the topographic maps, were scanned. Those contour lines were digitized and made into a 2D and a 3D model of, as you can see, the terrain, stitched together into this, what's called the National Elevation Data Set. One of the reasons why I love this map so much is because there's not any cultural features printed on top of it. You can get a printed map from the USGS map store of this, and obviously a digital version here on the web from the USGS. But one of the reasons why I like it is because there's no cultural features printed on top of it, you can see some really fascinating things. Even though it's the 48 states, you can see some really detailed areas that are sort of moderate scale, medium scale, and we'll talk about map scale in a bit. But right here in the right on the North Dakota South Dakota border, you can see where the glacial lobes divided, the Coteau de Praire landform up there. Fascinating. So you can see that when you're on the ground in that area, just east of Watertown, South Dakota, it doesn't look like much. It's just a low rise. But from a regional perspective, it really is pretty significant. Where you can say, "Wow, yeah, I can totally see where that glaciation divided." And then here in western Wisconsin, it's the driftless area where in the last advance of the continental glaciation that divided, leaving all of these incised streams. So nice place to go canoeing, some beautiful rolling terrain, whereas the area around it, as you see from this regional scale, is sort of sculpted and flattened by the massive, plowing power of these glaciers. Anyway, you've got the Black Hills out here in western South Dakota. You can see where the Platte River comes into Colorado. It's just fascinating. Another thing that's not very prominent on the ground, but I'd like to point out with this map, is right here in Northern California and then the northern part of the Central Valley, and that is Sutter Buttes. So it sticks out because the surrounding, and probably those of you that have been to the Central Valley can relate, it's extremely flat. It's actually one of the flattest places in the continental United States. People don't usually talk about the Central Valley being so flat, but it is. It's flatter than Kansas. It's flatter than Oklahoma. But the Sutter Buttes are, again, like the Coteau de Praire in South Dakota. It's not very prominent on the ground. You look out in the distance, and there it is, this sort of low couple of hills. But at this scale, it's fascinating. Another thing, while I'm here, I wish I could get excited about this stuff. Okay, forgive me, folks, but you can relate. You're in the mapping class, and so you're going to get a heavy dose of maps today. But look at the basin and range zone, where you've got those flat playas and then these up-thrusted fault block mountains. It goes all the way from southeast Oregon, down through Nevada, taking in a big part of Utah, some of Arizona, south of the Colorado Plateau here, on down into southern New Mexico, and then actually down into West Texas. So the Basin and Range province, physiographic region, is huge. It really is huge. And you notice it when you're in Las Vegas and places like that. But it actually extends from Texas all the way up to Oregon. Pretty cool. Yeah, good point. Yeah, about the weather maps and how the clearing of the air when the planes weren't flying and people weren't driving and so on and so forth. Yeah, so and also, yeah, that's a good one, Mike and Michelle. And also Courtney Jane talking about the relative sizes of states and countries. And yeah, that's another good one, how huge Alaska is. Yeah, so map projections actually matter. We'll talk about that in our course too. Greenland is not bigger than South America, as is depicted on most maps. Another one of my favorite maps. So anyway, this is the 1992 Thielen and Pike USGS map showing just the first digital seamless map of anywhere in the world. And of course, digital elevation maps are quite common now, but back then, and still just rather striking the way the symbology is portrayed. Another one of my favorite maps is this one showing, I used to work for the Census Bureau, so I love population maps of all kinds. And this one's rather intriguing because, like we talked about earlier, maps show a lot of information in a short amount of space. This one shows the percentage of people in specific years that were born in that state. Again, according to the census data is not perfect, but it's self-reported. We had a decennial census this year, as you know. But the idea is that with one glance, you can kind of see that, wow, okay, as of, and we also in each map have to be critical of the year that the data was produced. In 2012, so 8 years ago, but in 2012, less than half of the people that reported on their census form were actually born in Colorado. Okay, this comes from the American Community Survey, which is a monthly survey, so it's a bit of a sample, but still, no surprise to all of you living here, right? There's a lot of people that have moved to Colorado. as opposed to take a kind of scanning around here. What state stands out in terms of the most people? Look at Pennsylvania. Almost 3/4 of the people in Pennsylvania at that time were actually born in Pennsylvania. Okay? And then you look at another state that's actually less than Colorado. Okay, makes sense. Florida, a lot of migration there from, the sort of the icier regions of the country. For various reasons. You probably have known people that have retired and gone down to either Florida or Arizona. Look at Arizona is only 38%. So it's just fascinating to look at who was still living in the state that you were born in. I am not a native of Colorado. I told you I grew up in Grand Junction. There's Mesa County behind me. But I actually moved here when I was 7. So I've been here for quite a few decades. But I actually wasn't born here. So I'm part of that. I wasn't actually born here. But look at this. It's just fascinating to look at. You got a generally higher percentage in sort of the northern Midwest here, right? Iowa, Missouri. But then you've got Pennsylvania and Ohio being really high. Let's take a look at Colorado in a bit more detail. Let's take a look at, Colorado here. You've got additional information. So it's a bit of a small a print here, but let's see if I can biggerize that a bit. Yeah, that's not making the map bigger, sorry. Let's do this and then see if I can go up. Anyway, the point is, inside each state, you've got additional data. And sure, we could portray this on a standard set of graphs and in other ways, but I think this is a very compelling map and a reason for why maps actually matter. So here in Colorado, notice you've got a blob. Now this doesn't mean over in Moffat County or the northwest part of the state that people are from Texas. It's just in Colorado, 3%, according to this data in 2012, were actually from Texas. So you've got a higher percentage than the states in here that don't have a percentage at all because they're less than 1%. And then you've got California coming in at 6%. Okay, so 6 out of every 100 people, according to this data in 2012, actually moved here from California. And then outside the U.S., 11%, as opposed to California, where outside the U.S., 28%. So a lot more international immigration, right, to California or New York, et cetera, than here in Colorado. But still, Colorado being higher than a place like Nebraska. Fascinating to be able to do this. And you've got Illinois coming in at 3%, New York at 3%. Interesting. And then take a look at Utah, just to the west of us. More people living in Utah were actually born there. However, this is all about change over space and time. So if I look back in time, what was going on, in years past? Okay, well, you thinking about, okay, well, we've just looked at 2012. What about 1950? Colorado had a slightly higher, but some of these other states, wow, look at the South. Almost 90% of the people in Mississippi in 1950 were born in Mississippi. Well, much lower now, and a little bit higher in Florida, a little bit lower in California. So you think about, what was going on in the middle part of the 20th century. And then if we drill down to 1900, wow, you've got some different patterns where some states are over 95%. Okay, think about 1900. Ellis Island, big immigration, outside the U.S. certainly, but maybe not so much within the country. Internal migration back then. Interesting. So you probably think about, relatives of yours, your grandparents, and were they actually? A lot of my relatives are in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, yeah, America's Dairyland. And mine was one of the few families that actually moved out of there. Almost all of my relatives are still there. They love it there. Hey, they love the Packers. They love, cheese and the severe winters. And my dad personally had enough of that. So not about the Packers, but he had enough of the icy gray days in the winter. So he moved us to Colorado. The point is, though, you can kind of tie this to your own personal, thinking about your own family members and your relatives, especially generation or two that preceded you. Fascinating to be able to look at this. So now you're probably thinking, gosh, Joseph, this is really interesting. And yeah, that's exactly what I want you to think, is that, wow, in terms of your own exploration now, you can go, tonight, this weekend, say, Joseph, I'm looking at that migration map of the U.S. And I'll say, yes, excellent.